Hello, everybody. Welcome in once again to the city of New Orleans. My name is Brandon Adams. This is, of course, Dog Nation's Mike Griffith, a very special On the Beat presented by Ingles as we get ready for the Sugar Bowl tomorrow. Mike, good enough to allow me to encroach on his normal show here. Mike, thanks for sharing some of your airtime with me.
Absolutely, Brandon.
So a couple of things I want to talk about here as we are live from New Orleans getting ready for the big game tomorrow. We had a chance to hear from both coaches, Texas coach Tom Herman earlier this morning, Georgia coach Kirby Smart. And Mike, as a guy that's covered a lot of these press conferences, I'm curious if what jumped out at you is the same thing that jumped out at me. I was really struck by the fact that, to start with Herman here for a moment, he acknowledged how important this game is for his program. Obviously, many of us are aware of the numbers by now. Texas hasn't really been in a bowl game like this since 2009, hasn't won a major bowl like this. So you have to go back many years before that. So for Tom Herman, Texas is obviously one of the main top national brands in all of college football. It's one of the 10 winningest programs of all time, but they haven't been doing a lot of winning on the big stage as of late. And I thought it was really interesting to hear Herman admit that, yeah, being back on this stage for Texas is a really big deal, which potentially speaks to the motivation the Longhorns could show tomorrow night.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Texas needs this game. They're recruiting against Texas A&M and essentially recruiting against the SEC. And Brandon, I also think that's why Tom Herman, when he had the opportunity to heap great praise on Georgia, he kind of took a pass. He pretty much had an opportunity. He was pretty much asked point blank does Georgia look better than Oklahoma on film, or does Georgia's run game? And he wouldn't acknowledge either. He stopped short of saying that Georgia was the best team that he had seen this season. Now, he said that they're as good as anybody they'd seen, but clearly he's carrying himself with a lot of confidence, trying to project that to his players, and Texas believes if they play their best game, they're going to beat Georgia.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because I did think that was an interesting moment with Herman off the top of his press conference today. And Mike, you're a guy that's asked a lot of questions in press conferences like this in the past, and I was kind of interested in the way the question was phrased to Herman of, is Georgia the best team you've seen on film all year long? That's what the reporter asked. And for Herman, you know that you are kind of backed into a little bit of a political corner on that. If you come out and saying, yeah, Georgia is the best team we've seen, obviously you're going to anger your conference rival Oklahoma by saying that. If you say, nah, Oklahoma, I tell you what, that's a really dominant team, then that's going to anger the opponent that you're playing tomorrow night. So from that standpoint, the question does kind of back Herman into a corner a little bit, does it not?
Yeah, but his first answer was that I don't know, and then he said different. I mean, he could have said right off the bat, Georgia's the best team we've seen in a lot of different ways. We'll have to wait and see what happens in the game. But that wasn't what he said. I mean, he completely said, I don't know. We have a lot of respect for Oklahoma as well. And again, this is very much a Big 12 versus SEC conversation we're talking about here. I mean, Texas is trying to recruit against A&M, and they're trying to sell recruits that, hey, Texas and the Big 12 is every bit as good as the SEC. And, he's aware of the argument that Georgia should have gotten in the college football playoff. And, he wasn't going to take that bait.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And, I think that for a lot of Georgia fans, as I mentioned this morning on Dog Nation Daily, Herman's words are going to ignite a Georgia fan base that is already kind of on edge about all this anyway. Georgia fans did not like what they saw on Saturday night. So whether Herman was vouching for one side over the other, trying to sidestep the question all the way around, it doesn't take much right now to light the fuse when it comes to Georgia fans, because they watched Notre Dame and they don't think Notre Dame belongs in the same field as Georgia, and they watched Oklahoma, a team that, by the way, that Georgia beat last season almost 365 full calendar days ago, and they don't think Oklahoma's as good as Georgia either. Now, Georgia fans may be wrong about that, but right now Georgia fans are very passionate in their belief that they got a job by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee.
Yeah, and Herman said, best, it's hard to say best at anything. Well, you know what? It wasn't hard for Kirby Smart to say that they were the best, and it wouldn't have been hard for Herman to say that this was a team that was deserving of a playoff spot, and that it's just a really difficult situation, or unfortunate that it worked out that way for Georgia. There were a lot of things that Tom Herman could have said to give Georgia a lot more credit than he did, I suppose. There were a lot of ways he could have handled that, and the way he handled it made it pretty clear to me that he thinks Oklahoma's a better football team.
A lot of folks in the comment section are pointing out that the defensive coordinator, Orlando, certainly had a lot to say the other day about the Georgia running game for the positive.
Yeah, well, I mean, after his head coach pretty much threw him under the bus and said that he didn't think it would be that big of a deal to adjust to an SEC rushing offense, and after Tom Herman compared Georgia not only to Oklahoma, but Iowa State and Kansas was in the same sentence when he talked about how great the running teams were in the Big 12. And I know for a fact at least one Georgia player took note of that they were included in the same sentence with Iowa State and Kansas.
Cole Medlin in the Facebook comment section says the problem with the comment, or really any kind of comment like this, is the fact that no one plays good, consistent defense in the Big 12. And, that's something that Kirby Smart did talk about, not that no one plays defense in the Big 12, but the idea that when you have an SEC versus a Big 12 game, it's very much a conference versus conference thing, that there is, this intent on the part of the Big 12 to prove that it belongs in the same field with the SEC. A lot of SEC fans like Cole, Georgia fans like Cole, who don't think that Texas comes from a league that can validate itself with the same brand of physical football the SEC does. I mean, let's face it, there is not a great rivalry between Georgia and Texas necessarily. Between the SEC and its style of play, the Big 12 and its style of play, there's a pretty significant rivalry between the two leagues, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say so. We saw Baylor play Vanderbilt and win that football game, and I don't know if Oklahoma State and Missouri have played yet. I know that they were set to play, but yeah, there is a budding rivalry, and it even gets into the networks. With Fox, I think is more of the Big 12 station, versus ESPN and the SEC. So it's a debate that's going to go on. It goes on in the living rooms, and Kirby Smart made it pretty clear he felt his team belonged in the playoff. And when he was talking today, he said they wanted to make a statement, and when I asked Kirby what that statement was, specifically if it was that they were one of the 4 best, he said, no, it's that we're an elite team, and we want to prove to ourselves that we're an elite football team.
Patricia Price in our Facebook comment section says, Georgia, play your game. You got to focus. And that was something else that Kirby Smart did talk about a little bit when he met with the media a little earlier today, and that is the idea that it's been a little bit of a challenging month for Georgia. You've had the potential controversy of Justin Fields and his potential transfer from the program. You've had DeAndre Baker as a part of a wave of college football players deciding not to play in the bowl game. You've got some juniors who are certainly with good reason going to spend some time reflecting on their chance to go to the NFL draft once this season is done. How do you grade out how Kirby has handled what has been a month of, I don't want to say they have been distractions because we'll find out tomorrow just how focused Georgia really is, but certainly they are potential distractions that have to be navigated. Best guess, how do you think Kirby's handled this thus far?
I think he's handled it great. I think Kirby's kept the team focused all year. I think the seniors and Jake Fromm have kept the team focused all year. I think Fromm's done a particularly good job. Jonathan Ledbetter, junior J.R. Reed as well. These are all players that I think have been big leaders for Georgia, not just on the field, but off the field and in the locker room. And there's been a very consistent focus. I know when we did our podcast yesterday together, BA, you asked about the comments on Twitter. Really the first time that we'd seen Georgia, display some emotion outside of that professional focus, and an emotion that I think they needed to have. I think they needed to vent, get those frustrations out of the way because it had been building up, and they had to feel sick to their stomach watching those playoff games, knowing full and well that Georgia might have been the best team in the country in the playoffs had they been able to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have a real treat for you coming up on our program today. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingles. Later on, we'll get a chance to hear from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm as he met with reporters earlier this week. We'll also get a chance to hear some words from Georgia running back DeAndre Swift. And I don't know if you were as impressed with Swift as some of our Dog Nation video channel viewers were, because on Dog Nation Daily this morning, there were a lot of folks in the comment section talking about how much they liked the Swift video that was on the Dog Nation Facebook page earlier. We thought it's appropriate to show some of that video. We'll get a chance to see that in a couple of minutes. Obviously, Swift, a guy who's quickly becoming one of the real spokesmen for this Georgia team, is he not?
Yeah, I'd set that Facebook Live camera up in front of Jake and for a long time, and I just decided, those last 5 minutes to bring it over and put it in front of DeAndre Swift, because I think he's really emerged, and I think he needs a video like that. One of the questions I asked him during that video, and people that saw it know, is if he'd like to be a Heisman Trophy candidate, and DeAndre very much would, and I think he's very deserving. I was very surprised that he wasn't named first team All-SEC, but according to the AP panel that was put together, there was only one first team All-SEC player on this Georgia football team. So I think DeAndre is among the players that probably will go into next season with some preseason recognition, as Georgia will probably be a top 3 ranked team, assuming they take care of business against Texas.
Before we hear from DeAndre Swift, Michael Ryan Wilson, our Facebook comment section, brings up the name Tyson Campbell. I think that Campbell's obviously one of the real key performers tomorrow night, one of the guys I think a lot of Georgia fans are really curious about seeing. And here's my belief, that Campbell's career at Georgia still has a chance to be outstanding. I know some Georgia fans were concerned when he was removed from the starting position earlier in the year. And let's face it, Eric Stokes came in replacement of Campbell and played very well. My expectation is they'll both be starting cornerbacks for Georgia tomorrow night. And I am really eager to find out just how much Campbell has learned from playing earlier in the year, from watching a lot most recently. This is a 5-star athletic talent. This is a guy that can run with anyone. Now, we did see a freshman cornerback really challenge and probably not always passing the test against Oklahoma earlier on Saturday when Patrick Surtain Jr. for Alabama got roasted a lot. But it's going to be Tyson Campbell's night tomorrow to show how much he's grown and matured. And my guess is we'll see some good things from Campbell.
I think so. McCole Hardman said that he had some really good practices, and J.R. Reed and Richard LeCount. I had a story with them talking a lot about Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes and Mark Webb for that matter. The difficult thing for Georgia is going to be the size of these Texas receivers. They go about 6'6" and 6'4". I don't think Tyson's going to struggle, though, because where he had problems earlier was when receivers got behind him. Surprising stat about Texas, they haven't had a play go over 50 yards all year.
That's a pretty impressive stat. We'll hear more of that from Mike Griffith here in this very special presentation of On the Beat, presented by Ingles, live from downtown New Orleans, getting ready for the Sugar Bowl tomorrow. We'll also hear from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm later on in our program, but now, as promised, one of the guys that's becoming quickly one of the vocal leaders on this team is Swiftly. Very well said by the writer, Mr. Griffith there, and a guy who's exploded within the last month to truly be one of the most dynamic players in all of college football. It's Georgia running back DeAndre Swift. He met with the media earlier this week. Dog Nation was there to capture it live, and here's a little taste of that right now.
DeAndre, can you just kind of review your health this season? I remember, I guess it was the MTSU game. You only got 4 carries and everybody's antennas went up. Where were you at then from a health standpoint, and when did it start to get better for you?
Originally, first game we played Austin Peay, I was feeling like 100%. Didn't get that much play time, but I actually hurt myself again in South Carolina the next week. So that's when things started going downhill for me. My groin was messed up again. Tried to play the MTC game. I've been hurt ever since. Just getting back healthy was a big thing for me because I know when I'm healthy, like I said, the sky's the limit for me. But this season was a learning experience, most definitely.
As far as the kind of treatment, how involved was it? How many days a week were you in the training room? What time were you going in?
Every day of the week. Wake up at 6 o'clock, go get treatment before I had to go to class. I would go to tutoring, come back and get treatment, and have to go back to class, come back and get treatment before practice. So it was an ongoing process, daily thing. But I know what I had to do to get back onto the field because nobody likes being injured.
The bye week seemed to be the turning point. You've been on fire since that bye week. I think you've told us you still weren't 100% even after the bye week. Where are you at now, and what did the bye week do for you?
Bye week was a major impact for me. Coach Smart just let me really just get healthy the whole week. Didn't have to do too much practice and really focus on getting back. And that was a big help for me.
DeAndre, you and Elijah are one of the better tandems in the country. How do you complement one another?
Great. In this conference, you got to have multiple backs. It's great on our bodies as well. We don't have to take that many hits between each other. So when each one of us comes in, there's really no let off. I mean, I could do anything he can do, and he could do anything I could do. So I think we complement each other real well.
Back here live downtown New Orleans is a special presentation of On the Beat presented by Ingles. Mike Griffith. My name is Brandon Adams. Mike, good enough to share some of his showtime with me, and you just got a chance to see Georgia running back DeAndre Swift there as well, who you heard talking about the tandem that he's formed with his other really good running back at Georgia, which is Elijah Holyfield. A lot of Dog fans hope to see that tandem continue into next season. Obviously, Holyfield has said he's pondering an NFL decision. If you want to tie this into recruiting for a moment, Noah Kane, the 4-star running back from IMG Academy, Trey Sanders, his 5-star teammate, they both chose other schools besides Georgia. There's plenty of speculation in the recruiting trail that one of the reasons why Kane and Sanders went elsewhere is because of the uncertain status of Holyfield. Apparently, they think he's returning. Mike, I know we'll hear from Holyfield some more on that from the locker room tomorrow night, but obviously it's easy to understand why Georgia fans would love the idea of more Swift and Holyfield together next season.
Yeah, I thought Elijah ran really hard and really got the most out of his skills. I know he's one of the strongest players on the team and puts a lot of work in the weight room. I think if he sticks around another year, he'll probably work a lot on his top-end speed. I know he'd lost some weight to work on that this year. He also worked on catching passes better, something that Kirby Smart said at the start of the year he needed to do better. So I thought Elijah took a jump from last year to this season, and I think he can get even better. But to me, Swift is just head and shoulders the guy. I don't know how you take carries away from him. You got to get him 15 to 20 touches every game next season. Now that we've seen what DeAndre can do when he's healthy, he's an absolute game breaker and a home run threat. And his emergence after that bye week, getting healthier, to me was as big a factor as any for Georgia as they really turned it up offensively and got back to being that explosive team that we'd seen in the month of September.
Kent Caldwell in our Facebook comment section says it was a great answer from DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield. Chad Summer kind of agreeing about the entirety of the conversation. He says he loves what Swift had to say. I think Swift already has a lot of fans, probably made for himself a few more with some of those comments there, the way that he handles those questions from the media. And you mentioned the idea of Swift and that Heisman candidacy. You know, if you want to go back to the preseason, at one point in time, Swift was about 25-1 to win the award, which sounds like a long shot, but in comparison to the rest of college football, actually makes him one of the odds-on favorites. At the beginning of the year, no matter what Kirby Smart says, the truth is DeAndre Swift probably just wasn't 100% healthy. But over the last month or so, 6 weeks, we have seen what Swift at full health and full capacity looks like, and it's a really dynamic player. Can you imagine how much Georgia could gain from having 12, 13, 14, 15 games worth of that in 2019? It certainly is a fun idea for Georgia fans to conjure.
Yeah, especially when you look at that offensive line and what's coming back. You know, you bring everybody back but the center, and they're only going to get bigger and better and badder in a mean and tough way. And you know, Jake Fromm now, a clear starter, I suppose, if Justin Fields transfers as we expect. You know, Jake won't have to be looking over his shoulder, and he'll be getting more reps in practice, I would say. And that offense will probably have even more continuity. And I think the offense is going to be even better next year. I know Terry Godwin moves on as well as Lamont Gaillard, but other than those two, and maybe Isaac Nada, but with what you've got coming in and so many guys 1 year better and Jake Fromm 1 year older and wiser and better, I think that Georgia will have a championship offense next season.
Michael Ryan Wilson says also don't forget about Zamir White, Zeus, as he continues his recovery, see how he factors into all of that. You mentioned Jake Fromm, the Georgia quarterback. I'm eager to see Fromm tomorrow night. I'm also eager to hear from Fromm here in just a couple of moments on the Beat presented by Ingles. Before that, though, it's the other quarterback who's also gotten some attention, Justin Fields. Do you think Fields takes a snap tomorrow?
Yeah, I do. Georgia, Jim Chaney, the coordinator, said yesterday that, they were going to continue to operate as they have all year. And, I think Kirby's been honest and fair and forthright throughout this whole deal. And if they felt like Justin should play in 12 of the first 13 games at some juncture, I'm not sure why he wouldn't have that opportunity against Texas. And there's also the chance that, Georgia will be up by enough points that a lot of quarterbacks can play. Who knows? Maybe we'll see the third-string quarterback as well.
Maybe so. We'll see how that plays out. I want to give you a chance to hear from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm. And, listen, I was impressed as anybody with what Fromm did in the SEC championship against Alabama. I think this has been a season-long competition between he and Justin Fields. But in terms of the rightful starter at Georgia at quarterback, I think Fromm has clearly wrested that discussion away, and he's emerged as a clear winner in that regard, not just for throwing touchdowns against Alabama, but for the success against Florida and Kentucky and a nice string there in the month of November when Georgia became the best team in the SEC East and among the contenders for the national championship. Well, that was done on the shoulders of Jake Fromm. He now gets a chance to have an encore performance on a big stage, primetime TV, on New Year's night against the Texas Longhorns. What are his preparations like as he heads toward that game, and what does he see from the rest of his teammates? Well, Fromm is good enough to spend some time with reporters, including our own Mike Griffith here. Here's a taste of what Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm had to say. Hope you enjoy it.
How much have you and Justin talked about his situation? And last year you had the same situation with Jacob. Does it, you want to be a good teammate, but you're also in a competitive situation. How does that manifest itself in your relationships with these guys?
Yeah, first, I want to be a good teammate. So any way I can help him, I definitely am. Me and him personally have not really talked a whole lot about it. That's been a whole lot, more on him. But right now, I think both of us aren't really worried about that. We're really worried about, this football game and how we can make the team the best we can make it.
If the situation were reversed, you think you'd be looking to transfer?
I haven't. No idea. I hadn't thought about it.
Jake, what would your advice be for other quarterbacks that are going to be in two quarterback systems? I mean, this is starting to look like the future with the landscape. How did you stay so focused, and what would be some advice you'd dole out to quarterbacks that are going to deal with situations like you've had?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just control what you can control. You can't worry about things you can't control. That's not up to you. You can just come in and work and control what you can control.
So really good stuff from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm there, and I loved your question to him at the end about his advice for how, to handle a two-quarterback situation moving forward. There's a chance that if Justin Fields does move on from Georgia, he could be moving on into another two-quarterback system, especially if he goes to Ohio State, where Tate Martell, the presumed starter before Fields got in the mix there, has already been someone outspoken. What did you think of Fromm's advice and words about two quarterback systems, how it's worked out for him this year and how it could work out for other quarterbacks in the future?
I think Jake was being sincere. I think that's how he's approached it. I mean, control what you can control. And, he's always been very positive and supportive whenever Justin Fields' name's been brought up. And, really I was impressed in the SEC championship game that as well as he was playing when they put Fields in there, I wondered if it would disrupt his rhythm. But, I thought Jake came in there and played really well even after Fields had been put in the game. And maybe, there's a chance every time you switch quarterbacks, we know that can throw a team out of sync. But Jake Fromm showed his maturity and leadership and his ability to handle that by controlling what he can control.
I want to go to our YouTube comment section in the time we have left here on the Beat, presented by Ingles. Talk to some of our YouTube viewers here as they get excited about hopefully a fun New Year's Eve tonight and then a big day of college football tomorrow, capped off by Georgia versus Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Let's say hello to a few of these folks in here in the comment section. Justin Dinkin says Fields should have just gone to Penn State from the beginning. That's the school where he was committed before he eventually decommitted and ended up at the University of Georgia. I wonder if history could be rewritten, assuming Fields is about to be done at Georgia, if he would have done things differently and what would have looked like, and even if Georgia would have done things differently and just never brought in Fields, if they could know what they know now. Kirby Smart, obviously the chief decision maker in that regard. I think it'd be interesting to see if either one of these two entities would choose to go back and have a redo here.
Yeah, I'm not real sure about that. I think Fields served his purpose as Georgia. I mean, he was a quality backup quarterback that Georgia knew they had at the ready if something would have happened to Jake, and certainly it pushed Jake, and Jake became a really good quarterback. The team, I thought, really responded well to that competition. It was not divisive, and I think Kirby was able to send a message to everyone that nobody's position was safe. I think everybody learned a little bit from the Justin Fields, Jake Fromm situation. I think the fan base probably could have done without it. There was quite the battle, it seemed like, on social media. Still, to this point, there still are some people, believe it or not, that claim Justin Fields should have been the quarterback instead of Jake Fromm. So it was somewhat divisive in the fan base, but not in the locker room and not in the Georgia football program.
Kid in our YouTube comment section says, I wonder when we'll see Tommy Bush and Matt Landers on the field for real. That was another one of those interesting things that Kirby Smart had to say this morning, giving credit to Landers. Now, from Landers' perspective, it's 2 years in a row that he's been credited for his work as a scout team receiver. That's a little bit like winning the NIT tournament 2 years in a row. It's probably not the honor he wants bestowed upon him. But for Tommy Bush, who was kind of a late entrant into the 2018 class, a four-star receiver, who, much like Landers, has that size and athleticism, I think a lot of Georgia fans take some comfort in hearing that Kirby said that both Landers and Bush had done a pretty good job of emulating little Jordan Humphrey and Colin Johnson, the two very good Texas wide receivers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And don't forget Demetrius Robertson still looking for his first catch. This receiving core was very competitive. I thought one of the key things Georgia did that helped Jake Fromm and helped the offense after the LSU game was they really kind of cut that receiver rotation down a little bit. And, we saw J.J. Holloman emerge a little bit, and Godwin got hot at the end of the year. And Riley Ridley, he's a guy that, we haven't seen a lot of Ridley here. I thought he might be in an availability, and when we talk about juniors who might go pro, it almost makes me wonder if they're keeping him away from the media on purpose for that reason.
Well, I will tell you, of all the juniors, this is obviously just my opinion, but that's what I give for a living. Of all the juniors, he's the most likely to leave, that I believe, because I believe that he'd be the highest drafted of any of the current juniors on Georgia's roster. He'd be the highest drafted, and therefore, just given that status, the most likely to leave, I believe, anyway.
Yeah, I could see that. Him along with J.R. Reed, Isaac Nada, and even Blankenship, another guy that's graduated. So, those would be the four that I would look at potentially to leave. If I was leaning on guys that are leaving instead of staying, those would be the four I'd identify.
Mary Klauser, an interesting comment in our YouTube comment section earlier as well, and I wanted to reference this. She said that Texas hasn't seen a team like Georgia all season long. I would certainly agree and say that's true, but here is, Mike, one of the ironic things about Texas, I believe. They actually probably have more in common with Georgia than they do Oklahoma, their number one Big 12 rival. The way they've out-recruited everyone in the Big 12, including Oklahoma. I think that Tom Herman's more committed to running the football and building an offense. It's not a full-on pro-style offense because obviously Herman still has some spread concepts, but there's probably more pro-style elements in the Texas offense than there are in most Big 12 offenses. Obviously, Texas is nowhere near as talented as Georgia. That's why Georgia's a 2-touchdown favorite. But in terms of comparisons here, Texas is the least like the Big 12 of any other team in the Big 12. And I think that's at least an important note to bring up here. I don't know how well prepared they are for this game because they've been playing typical Big 12 teams. But in terms of how Tom Herman's trying to build that roster, it's a lot more like an SEC team is, like most of the average Big 12 teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Texas is more physical, and when I went out to their practices this week, they certainly passed the eyeball test. I mean, they've got some big linemen and some big running backs as well. So that'll be an interesting aspect of the game, and that's been kind of an advantage for Texas over Big 12 teams was that physicality. And you wonder what's going to happen if Texas can't win the battle of physicality. I've had more than one coach or former coach tell me in the last few days that they expect Georgia to destroy Texas and that they don't expect this game's going to be close. And those are the experts talking. So it'll be interesting to see if all that proves correct.
That will be very interesting to see how all of that plays out. Really looking forward to Georgia, Texas in the Sugar Bowl tomorrow. I guess, Mike, this is obviously your show. It's On the Beat presented by Ingles, so we want to give you a chance to have some final thoughts. This may be the final time you speak to a Dog Nation video audience here in 2018. So what's on your mind here as we wrap up this calendar year and turn the attention to the final game of the 2018 season on the first day of 2019 tomorrow? What are your final thoughts here as Georgia gets ready to put a bow on its season?
I'm looking forward to the game. I think like everyone else, I know Georgia wants to make a statement, and you hope these players have an opportunity to show their skills, and you hope that Texas puts up enough of a fight that it's not 28-0, like it was in the Alabama-Oklahoma game, and then we watch one long game of keep away. I mean, that game was not an 11-point game against Alabama and Oklahoma. It was the biggest 11-point blowout I've ever seen, and I hope we don't get a game like that because that's not good for the viewers. I'm looking forward to more Georgia in 2019 post Sugar Bowl. I want to see what the next Georgia team has. I want to see who's still on the team, who's ready to just go ahead and leave, and see what leaders will emerge in spring drills. I like the feel that I got of Kirby Smart this year. I think he's as transparent as any coach in the SEC. Kirby's not afraid to tell you what's on his mind. I enjoy his press conferences, and I think he's fun. I think he has some fun with the reporters from time to time, and talking with the Georgia players. I think they represent their school really well, and they have a personality too. And I'm starting to see this really, emerge. Kirby will be going into year 4. I think he's growing more comfortable in his own skin. He's not defensive when he gets asked questions, maybe as much as he was the first couple of years, BA. And these players now, Georgia football is starting to get more of its own identity. It's starting to blossom before our eyes, and certainly next year there's a better schedule. The Bulldogs will have high expectations. A better home schedule, certainly, and I've got to think the weather will cooperate. And what was it last year? Over 100 degrees up until November, and then it was about 40. It seemed like. So I've got to believe the weather's going to be a little bit nicer. The season will probably be more fun, not as stressful if Justin Fields moves on. There won't be the constant bickering in the fan base about the quarterbacks, and I think Georgia fans will probably would agree. They're probably looking forward to Georgia making a national championship run and going to the playoffs next year. Maybe we'll be right here again next year. This will be the site of the national championship game, and right now, I would say that's probably what I'd predict.
And I'll certainly enjoy hearing that from Mike Griffith, and I'll take this opportunity to also speak to our video audience for the final time here in 2018. And I'll actually use to my advantage something that Mike Griffith said on a recent episode of Dog Nation Daily, that, Mike, you said that for you, the start of the 2019 season is actually the first calendar day of 2019. Yeah, how Georgia does in the Sugar Bowl against Texas is a tone setter for the upcoming season. I do agree with that and believe that's true. And yet, I also think it's important to remember what Kirby Smart has said in the past about be where your feet are and live in the moment. And that moment for Georgia right now is the Sugar Bowl. And obviously you can't talk about it without talking about the fact that it's a goal and an objective just short of the ultimate prize, which is being in the college football playoff. But to see Georgia fans here in New Orleans this week, they're obviously having a good time. To hear Kirby Smart speak this morning and the Georgia players that you've spoken to over the last few days, they're obviously blown away by the hospitality they're getting from the folks here in New Orleans as part of the Sugar Bowl as well. This is a bowl and a game that has great heritage for the Georgia program. Some of the greatest moments in the history of UGA happened right here in New Orleans, right there in that Superdome. So I'm kind of taken aback a little bit by the nostalgia of great things that have happened for Georgia in the city in the past, but also in the appreciation that, you know what, Georgia has risen as a program to the level that it's been in major bowls now 2 years in a row. In Pasadena last year, in New Orleans this year, and I do think the best is still yet to come, but New Orleans in itself, that ain't so bad. So whatever you're getting ready to do in terms of watching this game and enjoying that tomorrow, I hope you enjoy it with a whole lot of fun. And certainly Happy New Year on behalf of everyone here at Dog Nation. Connor Riley, our on-site producer, Michael Carvel, back in our Atlanta Dog Nation World Headquarters studios. Thank you all for making 2018 a terrific year for Dog Nation. I agree with much of what Mike said before. I think 2019 is going to be even more fun, and I look forward to sharing each of those moments with you. Happy New Year. Enjoy the Sugar Bowl. We'll talk to you tomorrow from the Superdome.